Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I hope you all had an enjoyable lunch, nice break. I love beans and rice. Thank you for coming. My name is Jennifer Hornsby. I work in the University Registrar Services office. I have worked here since 1991 in different roles. I was here in 2007 when ASU implemented PeopleSoft. I helped with that implementation. And today I'd like to share a little bit about the data that I know with you. Today I want to tell you about the student profile tables. It's said in the little blurb, but I don't know if everybody read it or you just came to this room because it was closest. This is not the student profile that you see in Salesforce. It's also not the student profile that you see on the institutional analysis reporting site. This is a data warehouse PeopleSoft student profile. I'm going to tell you about the student profile tables, a little bit about the data that we get enrollment status from. We're going to look at term statistics. We're going to talk about new, returning, and continuing and what is a first-year student. We'll talk about major, college, and campus, the primary record flags, hoping we have time by then, and the snapshots. So first, what I want to say is at ASU, we have a lot of students enrolled at one time. Whether it's 180,000, 190,000, whatever it is, those are both really big numbers. And so when we talk about numbers enrolled with each other, with leadership, when you hear President Crow talking, that number is really hard to understand unless you break it down into categories that mean something, that tell a story about the students, who they are, what they're studying, where they're studying, and when they're studying. So these are some categories that we have used for reporting long before PeopleSoft, before student profile. These are just standard categories. Some are, I guess, a little bit newer, but some of the categories that tell us who they are the new, returning, and continuing, whether they're a first-year student or a new transfer, if they're an Arizona resident or a non-resident, and then whether they're pursuing an associate, a bachelor, master's, or a doctoral degree. This tells us who they are, how long they're going to be here, maybe why they're here. We also report on where they're studying, what college, department, major, campus, location. And this helps us get a grip on where enrollment is either increasing or decreasing. We have data in student profile that tells us how they're doing. Are they enrolled or have they withdrawn? Did they drop before the semester started? What's their GPA? How many credit hours are they in? Did they drop from full-time to part-time? We have their academic standing that pulls in from the previous semester. And then it tells us when they're applied to graduate or if their degree has been conferred. So the student profile tables we built with partnership from Enterprise Technology and the Office of Institutional Analysis. Back in 2009, we decided we were swimming in data and it was my Disneyland. All of the data that we had in PeopleSoft, all of the tables, all the effective dated history, it was wonderful, but it was a little overwhelming. So there was a need to build something that would simplify all of that detail, all of that data into one or two. We wanted one, but we ended up with two tables, and hopefully I can explain why, that pull all of this data into easy to use. Well, I think it's easy to use. I hope you do too. And then these tables are sort of the middle layer between all of the messy data in the transactional system and then consistent, easy to use reports that you can pull meaning from. This is just the first step of analyzing student data. After the student profile tables were built and in production for a while, the student analytics team in ET took it several steps further and made even more enriched data tables that make things even easier for everyone to use. But this was just the first step. 2009, that was 16 years ago. Not going to ask you to read this. I want you to know that the documentation is available. It always has been. It's pinned in the Where's That Data channel. It's been there for years. I did update some of it last night because the tables did just go through an upgrade in October. So this QR code takes you to the overview, which is like a white paper. It's just some things to know about student profile and what it is and when it updates and how far back does it go and all of that stuff. And there is also a data dictionary that's also been out there for years. I did update it within the last couple of days to reflect the changes that we just made in October, including pulling in the medical school so that when we have medical school students in a month or two, you'll be able to see them in these tables. Last, I want to point out that on our analytics site, enrollment and records, in the student section, there are some pre-built reports. It's just a data dump of all the data, all the rows in these tables. There are some parameters you can filter before you run it, but everything I'll talk about today, if you want to see what it looks like while I'm talking, you could run one of those. Okay. So I said there's one table, then I said there's two, and I'm telling you there's three. The first two tables are the student profile by term tables. We wanted them all in one table, but the granularity didn't work. And so the engineer who developed it said these really need to be two tables. I almost never query with one table and not the other. I almost always join them together to get it all at one time. You don't have to. The difference is, well, first of all, they're both term-based tables. Does everybody know what I mean by term here at ASU? Fall, spring, summer? The first two tables are term-based tables. They have term-based information. One of them has more than one record per student if that student is active in multiple careers, programs, plans, or subplans. So it is not one record per student. The other table is one record per student per term, and it's everything that is true about the student in that term, whether you tie it to one major or another. An example of that is the athlete flag. They're either an athlete or they're not in that term. It has nothing to do with their major. Because the first table has multiples, that's why we have the primary record flags, and I'll get into that about halfway through today. The third table is newer. It is student profile current. It has all the major related data. It is not term-based. It has nothing that's term-based like enrollment or academic level or GPA. It's just their major. But it includes all of the active students. It's their major as of today. It's not tied to a term, so it includes future admits. So those are the three tables. Those are my babies. So I'll talk about the term-based tables first because we had them first and I use them most often. Because they're term-based, it only includes students that are term activated. That means it doesn't include future admits that we haven't term activated for yet. If that doesn't mean anything to you, tomorrow I'm doing another presentation about the life cycle of a student, and we'll talk about term activation there. So the data in these tables is tied systematically to that term. If the table is naturally a term-based, it has an S term in it, then it's for that term. If it's not, so for example, the program plan data that a student has, it's not really term-based. We pull in based on the effective date at the start of the term. These tables only include the 4 credit careers. That means the non-credit career, also known as global launch, is not included in these tables. But undergrad, grad, law, and the medical career will be in it. It has data back to 2005 in Data Warehouse. In PeopleSoft or in ODS, it's only 1 year back. And at the end, I hope I have time to explain why. But in Data Warehouse, it goes back 10 years. So real quick, I said requirements for, I said only students that are term activated are in this table. Every 21st day, fall and spring, the registrar's office discontinues students that are not enrolled or don't meet the university's continuous enrollment requirement. We do that on the 22nd day. As soon as we do that, we start term activating for the upcoming term. That's to enforce enrollment requirements, continuous enrollment requirements. Once we do that one time, we only discontinue once, then we term activate for the upcoming term. And all the students that are term activated are theoretically going to be eligible to enroll. So when we term activate, that record has to either be admitted for that term or they have to be continuing from a previous term. Their program plan stack has to be active as of the first day of the upcoming term. We can future date things, we do all the time. And they need to not have already applied to graduate before that term. So the first table, you shouldn't have to try to read all of this. This is just to show you all of the fields that are there. It's a lot of data, a lot of fields. This is just a snapshot for one sample student. And these are all the fields that are related to the student's enrollment status. It tells us, one field tells you enrolled or not. It's the E on the bottom left, the ASU enrollment status. That could be a D for dropped, W for withdrawn, or N for never registered. We've got the dates that they enrolled, dates they withdrew if they did withdraw. We have their units, the number of classes they're enrolled in, all of their cumulative stats related to that term. I learned this morning I should never show you a table like this, so I won't spend much time on this. This is just letting you see what it looks like when you look at dozens and dozens of students at a time, all the different records you might see there. Next are the term statistics. These are the things that aggregate over time about a student, their academic level, their credit hours, their GPA. All of those are, all of the items in the right column are all the flavors of credit hours. ASU credit hours taken for progress, taken for credit, taken for GPA, transfer credit, the TC adjust, if they took more than 64 hours from a 2-year school. So those are the term statistics. Almost all of these come straight from the term history table in PeopleSoft, which is student car term. If you build queries, you should be familiar with that. Let me go back one. Let me try to go back one. Nope. There's one field in there that's not straight from student car term, and that is the TC adjust. That is the credit hours we subtract from the total transfer units that don't count in the total units that student has. In PeopleSoft, that just sits on a term, and it's normally the student's first term at ASU, which could have been 4 or 5 years ago. We didn't like that. We wanted it to be pulled forward to the current term always, so we aggregate it every term. We just add it and pulled it forward into one field here, so you can always see it. The other is reset cum stats. Reset cum stats happens for 2 reasons. One is good. If the student graduates, they get their bachelor's degree and come back for another bachelor's degree. We reset everything to 0. The other isn't great. It's the academic renewal. If they weren't doing well, They can leave for 5 years and apply to come back. And when they do that, we reset their stats as well. So we pull that forward as well and tell you for this student, even if it wasn't on this current term, it might have been a year ago. So you can always see it on the current row. Last is the fun part. It's the NRC and new undergrad status. So NRC means new, returning, and continuing. Again, I started off by saying this helps us tell a story about who the students are, how long they've been here, whether they stopped out and came back. It seems really simple, but there are a lot of rules that go into calculating this. And this is where we used all the help of our friends in institutional analysis to make sure that when we're doing reporting now, looking forward to spring, for example, we're using the same logic that they're going to use on the 21st day of spring. At least that's the goal. So new just means they weren't here before, right? It's so easy. It's a little more complicated than that. It means they weren't here before at that same education level. So a student who was a bachelor's degree student last spring could be pursuing a master's this fall, and they are now new again. Different education level. A master's student who's now a PhD student would be new again. Returning means they've been here before, but they weren't here last semester. Again, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's just the basic idea. And then continuing means they were here last semester. And I keep saying these are term-based tables. This is not session-based. You can't use this to know who was continuing from session A into session B. We don't do, the registrar's office doesn't report at that level. This field changed in October. Up until October, we only counted graduate students as either new or continuing. If they weren't here in the last semester, they were new again. Institutional analysis doesn't count them that way, so we updated the logic in this table last month. So from now on, we have the returning category. So what is prior enrollment? You probably thought that was simple too, huh? It means they're either enrolled or withdrawn. We count W's. We only look back to fall or spring term. Summer doesn't count. They have to have been in state-funded enrollment. Now, most of our enrollment in fall and spring is state-funded, so don't worry about it. If you know, it doesn't matter that much, but they have to have been state-funded. One example of something that doesn't count is ULC classes. Those are not state-reported. It has to have been at the same education level. So I talked about a bachelor's to a bachelor's or a bachelor's to master's. So we look at that. We also have a lot of visiting scholar and exchange student programs. So we take those populations out. If they were here before as a visiting scholar and now they're here on their own, they're new. Because now we expect them to graduate from ASU. So that's pretty simple, right? Now that you know what new means, you should know what a first-year student means. It's a student who is new and is in a bachelor's program and either graduated from high school the same year they first enrolled at ASU, or they have less than 12 transfer credits earned after high school graduation. That make sense? Thanks. In student profile, we actually flag whether they are bachelor's or associates. They're all labeled as a freshman, and I know we're not supposed to use that term right now, but this is 10 years of coding. We're not going to change the field name. We just translate it to first-year student on reports. Unless they're an associate student, then we label them as a first-year associate. So this is basically what I just said. We take out new non-degree students, standalone certificates, and visiting scholars. Those, when they're new, are labeled new non-degree. And if they didn't graduate from high school the same year that they came to ASU, or they have more than 12 or more credit hours, then we label them as a new transfer student. The field, it says freshman in the table, we just label it as first year student. And here's a logical diagram of how the logic works. It is a little more detailed than this. This is what I could fit on a slide. It does give you a nice logic to walk through when you're trying to figure out why someone is or is not a first year student. There are some policy practices in play when a student is a first year student or not, and we get a lot of questions in my office about why they are or are not. And this is where I look, because this is almost always the answer. All right, are there any questions about new or first year student? All right. The heading on my slide is wrong. This is intended to be showing, oh no, this is right. These are all the fields that you might look at to tell why you don't see new, returning, continuing, or the new undergrad status that you expected. These are all the relevant fields that are right here in this one table. There's a lot of other tables you might have to look at, but in general, these are the relevant ones. And then we have all this major information. This is one of the reasons why we wanted this table so badly. It pulls all of the students' program plan stack into one table. I know now we have better tables in the student analytics, but for a while this was all we had. It has their program, their plan, the English description of their program and plan, same thing with their subplans, their degree codes. It tells you their requirement term, which is their catalog year. We pulled in the ACAD org code, which is the department that owns the major. All that good stuff. One of my favorite fields is the education level, and on this slide, I don't know if you can see it, but most of them are 13. That's a bachelor's degree. So when I say if they were at the same level last semester as they are this semester, that's what we're looking at. Bachelor's is a 13, associates is a 10, master's is 15. Oh, sorry, master's is a 17, law is 15. Now, I wanted to show you here, this is what a student's program plan stack looks like. This is one student who was applied, got admitted, matriculated, then they applied to graduate, and then they completed their degree. So this is what the data looked like before student profile, just to show you we loved all the data, all the effective dating. We could go back through history to see whatever we needed to. But it required us to always do max effective dated subqueries. And in this table, it's not just the effective date, it's the effective sequence, because they could have 5 or 6 sequences all on the same effective date. Which, like I said, it's my Disneyland to plow through all that data, but nobody wants to do that all the time. Also at ASU, we have a lot of users in the academic units who are updating student majors, for undergraduates at least. And when they update a student's major, they can intentionally backdate it or future date it, depending on whether the student should be eligible for courses in the term that already started or not, and whether the student should be charged any program fees in the term that already started or not. So they can intentionally backdate or future date, and they do it all the time. So in this example, I highlighted 2 rows. The action date, which is in the center of the screen, shows you that the person made the change on January 31st, and they backdated it to January 5th. Does anyone know why someone would have backdated it to January 5th? Exactly, start of the term. At January 31st, it was still early enough that a student could register for session B, and if the classes they needed to register for have enrollment requirements, also known as prereqs, or if the student needed to be charged some fees or not, get out of the program that was charging fees, they have to backdate it to the term start or prior. So that's what that means. In the student profile major by term, we pick up the record that's effective, the last effective dated row before the term start. So all of this gets collapsed. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say about the backdating. If they had not backdated it, if they had dated it January 31st, that would mean that that major change is not effective until the upcoming semester, so summer or fall. Next, I wanted to talk about some primary records, and I'm sorry, this is a terrible slide. I've been trained and I won't do this again. So there's some columns in student profile. We have the ASU primary record flag, the ASU primary career, the ASU primary program, and the ASU primary plan. Those are 4 columns. If you ever only want 1 record per student per term, you just use the primary record flag equals Y, and you'll get 1 record per student. It's always a Y when the career, program, and plan are primary. Students can have multiple primary plans on a career. They can have multiple primary careers. No, that's not true. They can have 1 primary career. They can have multiple primary programs, 1 on each career is what I meant to say. So I'm going to start at the right. The primary plan is the easiest one to understand. It's the most major, if that makes sense. If the student has a major and a minor, or a major and a certificate, the primary plan is the one that's the most major. Plan codes have plan types that tell you if it's a major, minor, certificate. We use that to pull forward what the primary is. Next, the primary program is also very easy. It is the primary program in student car term. If you use PeopleSoft, it's the primary program that you see on the academics tab of the Student Services Center. That primary program is used to calculate the student's tuition and fees. It's also used by the enrollment engine when the student is registering. That's what determines how many credit hours that student is allowed to register for in a term. Some programs allow more units than others. We can't apply different rules for each class. It's each rule for that term. So the primary program is important, but it's easy. It's whatever is in student car term. Primary career is a little more complicated, and I could talk about this for hours, but the primary career has a whole bunch of rules, a lot of it related to finance. If a student is enrolled in more than 1 career in the same term, well, I shouldn't have started with that. If the student is active in more than 1 career in the same term, we look at which career they have enrollment attached to. Which career did they register for classes under? If they still have multiple, then we look at the billing career. The billing career derives the tuition calculation. So we can change a student's billing career on their academic career to be the other career, to make it primary, and that's the way their tuition gets calculated. If we don't do that, if they have 2 billing careers, then we look at which career has a degree-seeking primary program and which does not. If they're both degree-seeking or both non-degree-seeking, then we use financial aid primacy rules, which say that now it's going to be medical school as primary, then law, then grad, then undergrad. And I had a diagram, I just didn't get it in here in time, I'm sorry. I'm showing you an ugly table instead. So all of that is behind those primary record flags. The reason we had the primary record flags is because 50% of the time someone wants a report with all of the things on it, and the other 50% of the time they just want 1 record per student. So the other term-related table is called student profile by term. This is the one I told you has the athlete flag. It also has the honors flag. It has aggregated credit hours and units for state-funded reporting. It has some flags for enrollment holds and academic standing. Again, these are things that would be true about the student for that term, regardless of whether you were looking at one career or another. The last of the three tables is the youngest. It's the student profile major current. This has all of the fields from the tables I just showed you, except it's dated as of today's date instead of as of a term start. There's no term-related information in this at all. You can't use it to get enrollment status because that's a term-related concept. It only includes active students. So as soon as a student graduates, they disappear from this table. The other thing that happens that we get questions about is on the 22nd day, we discontinue the students for non-enrollment. When we do that, we future date it for the end of the term in case they want to register for session B. So the day of graduation, students disappear from this table because we posted degrees or because they didn't enroll, and that was the effective date that they are no longer active. And that's when tens of thousands of records will disappear. Yes?
So from an access management perspective, that's also when those students that didn't enroll in St. Paul and haven't enrolled in the upcoming spring term would also be losing the student access that they had retained as sort of a grandfather for the fall semester.
Are you asking me that, or are you telling me that?
I'm asking to confirm.
Okay.
Because working in the call center, I tend to notice a lot more calls around December, around that time, and most of those are alumni who lost the extension of access that we granted previously.
I'm not qualified to answer that. I mean, it does seem suspiciously close to probability, but I know that there are some services that even former students get a little bit longer than that. I think enterprise technology manages that, and I'm not going to try to answer. This table also includes the non-credit career because it doesn't include any of the enrollment data, which I and my team are not close at all to what Global Launch does with their programs, but it does include the students themselves, so we know who is active. And again, it has no term-based information. There's no GPA, there's nothing in there. Wow, I went fast again. All right, is there anything you want me to back up to and go into a little more detail? Yes. Yes. Okay, that's a great question. The question was about the Barrett Honor Student Flag. It's a yes/no flag and how it relates to the individual student group codes that Barrett uses to manage their population. It is based on the student group code. I know there's a few different flavors of a Barrett student. But this flag is based on the student groups that are included in the reserve capacity for classes that are reserved for Barrett students. Since these tables are mostly used for enrollment and enrollment reporting and enrollment tracking, we decided to make it something easy to get at, we should base it on what the enrollment engine is going to use to determine if they can register for the class. So it doesn't include some of the other student groups, like the ones that track whether they're going to complete or not, or they're continuing after graduation. Does that help? It does pull the effective date as of the term start because the Barrett student group codes do trigger the extra fees for the Barrett students. So if a student leaves Barrett in the middle of a semester and it's not backdated, it's just dated today, that student will have a Barrett flag of yes for the current term and no for the future term, the same way as their tuition shouldn't call it tuition, the fees get recalculated. If it was backdated back to August 21st, I don't remember the first day of the term. If it was backdated, then it would be no today, even if the transaction was processed this week. I did think of another topic I forgot to talk about, and that's the snapshots. So we use these student profile tables for enrollment tracking and enrollment reporting all the time. The data in these tables changes dynamically all throughout the day and one day to the next. There's hundreds of thousands of changes, credit hours, GPAs, enrollment status. None of that is effective dated. So in order to do reliable reporting and be able to replicate the number today that we might have distributed a month ago or a year ago, we snapshot these tables. We snapshot the whole table, as well as a few critical fields and a couple of other tables so that we can do enrollment tracking reporting and report on this term compared to the same point in time last year or 10 years ago. We have snapshots back to 2010, so we can go back as far as we want. The snapshots are described in the overview that I had the QR code up for first. That's in Google Drive. We snapshot daily from the first day that enrollment starts until the 21st day of session B. So that gives us all the flexibility we need to if something happens and enrollment is dropping and leadership wants us to analyze what's going on. And then after the 21st day of session B, we go to just a weekly snapshot until the end of the term. And the last snapshot is on the day that we do end of term processing. That is processing updates to GPAs when a student repeats a course for grade improvement. The day that we do that, we also run academic standing, which is when we put students on probation or disqualification or warning. And then that night is when the last snapshot is taken for a term. Yes?
I know that the title of the table you have using student profile. I come from an old school, they are the same as SR 01898. Okay, on that, we have the PS version, which is like daily update. When will they stop update? Is it at the last day of the semester or how they work?
Okay, the question was when do the tables stop updating? And I'll let you know. Yeah. I'll let you know whether you're looking at the one with the pretty name, Student Profile Major, all written in English, or the ugly one, SR 189 SPRF. They're the same tables. They just, one has a friendly name. It's the same data in both. They update 7 days a week in PeopleSoft. And when they update, 6 days a week, it goes, we call it current, but it's really the current, future, and 1 year in the past. And it will go back and update the terms for all the current terms. And then on Saturday nights, it goes back 5 years. And that's to pick up students that graduated late, grade changes. We're processing so many grade changes, late grades, all of those things. So we go back 5 years. The terms that are in data warehouse for terms more than 5 years ago are static. They're never going to update again. So once a term is more than 5 years old, it's static.
So a lot of time we're being asked to report certain, whether it's a major data or enrollment data for a specific time frame. Now, one way we use a institutional analysis version, but again, there's something that we want to use the PeopleSoft also. So will you recommend that using your CS version of those tables? Like I know it's a 3/sub day, first 21st day, 45th day, and something 21st day. And I think that's worked out well because sometimes we want to pick up anybody, whether they attend B session or ABC session. You just have to, summarize it and do it. So would that CS table a better table to use? If it has to be specific term or whatever.
All I can say is it depends. Again, the CS version of the table is only fall and spring. Usually if I need to do something that's more than comparing this year to the same point last year, depending on what it's for, I'll probably use the student term enrollment from institutional analysis or the all session table that includes summer. Some cool things I've done with the snapshots though that it wasn't built for is analyzing how many students were active and either enrolled or could have enrolled and didn't, and how many applied to graduate over time. And with the snapshots, you can look at what month of the semester does applying for graduation peak. When is it stable? When does enrollment peak? And when, it's pretty fascinating to look at things like that.
Because a lot of time, as a data analyst, we don't know which table to use.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess sometimes it's like, this is very variable though, your snapshot timing. Because
Yes.
it's very determined, because whatever table you use, you get whatever result.
Yes, you'll get a
Not
different.
necessarily the same.
Exactly.
So, my office normally want the PS version, but again, I also noticed that we'll miss out something, particularly the credit hour in progress. They update it.
Yes.
So
Every
unless
day.
I go to the student enroll table, which is like, there's a massive data, add job, you go into that. But,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So what he's talking about are the snapshot tables. There are snapshot week numbers and snapshot day numbers. I don't know what today is. I think we're about 9 weeks in, 10 weeks in, something like that. But there's 2 fields that let you pick. If I want week 3 for the last 5 years, you can get week 3. It's going to be the same point in time for 5 years. There's also a week number C21, which is the 21st day of the term, C for census. There's a C21B, and there's a C45. There's another flavor of the same table that starts with CS, and it's the same thing. So yeah, you can play with all of that. Any other questions? Yes.
On one of the previous slides, you had the example of talking about term activation and deleting term activation for a student that applied to graduate later. And if the term activation couldn't be deleted, that would switch the eligible to enroll flag from one to N. Question one, does deleting term activation look like removing the row from student profile?
Yes.
That would open it up. And then question 2, are there any other reasons why a row might be removed from student profile, like aside from that example?
Trick question. We delete term activation when it was wrong. So let's say the student got applied as both an undergrad and a grad, and they never should have been a grad. They're not going to enroll as a grad. To clean up the record, we might delete the grad term activation because they're enrolled as an undergrad. Cleaning up fraudulent records, sometimes we delete it. We don't really have a systematic process for deleting anything other than they applied to graduate, at least currently. Thank you for the question. All right. Is there anything you want in student profile that's not there that you can't get from this student analytics tables? No? Yes.
Is there a reason why session is not part of that profile now?
That's a good question. The question was, is there a reason why session is not part of the profile now? 15 years ago, it wasn't important, so it wasn't designed that way. We can do session reporting, we do all the time, just using the other two tables that I mentioned that we snapshot as well, which is the class table and the student enroll table. So it's a few extra steps for us, and we're not rolling it up into one record per term. I mean, I guess that would be nice if we had developers to do that. Yeah. Then we'd have to decide what all of it means. Yes. Yeah. So the concept of market is really important during recruitment and admission processes. After the student has enrolled, though, their ties to their former state or where they came from get looser and looser and kind of gray. Like, what does it mean to be from that place if I'm never going back there? So we've deliberately stayed away from it, to be honest. And in my experience reporting by market, the definitions have changed so much every year. I don't know if we could keep up with it because it's not really a stable. Have you noticed that?
You know, I would say the main ones that they work on are like WUI, out of state, international,
Mm-hmm.
so if you would have an column of those five,
Yeah.
people that are being asked to like, interact with this data and use this data with students,
Mm-hmm.
they're often having to talk about finances with them and don't know their finance literacy.
Right.
You know, these things are
Yeah. And the WUI program is actually ramping down. So this spring is the last incoming group of students for WUI. Hopefully it simplifies things. Okay. If you have a second, please give me some feedback. There's just a quick 2-question survey. Thank you.